Hi, everybody. Welcome to this month's edition of the Portals Community Call. It's May 2021, and our focus this month is going to be on PCF and Power Apps portals. We have with us once again Business Applications MVP Nick Hayduk. Glad to have him here with us. We appreciate you guys attending. If you have any questions during Nick's presentation, this is meant to be flexible and interactive, so please feel free to type any questions that you might have, and Nick will take care of those. So Nick, without any further delay, I'm going to hand things off to you to get us started.
Awesome. Yeah. If you do have any questions throughout the presentation, there's that questions functionality built into the GoToWebinar. So that's the best way. And as Laura mentioned, it's great to be interactive and ask me some questions. So appreciate those. All right. Let's get started here. So quick introduction. I'm guessing a lot of you probably have been on, this is maybe not your first call, but if it is, my name is Nicholas Hayduk. I'm the president and software engineer with Engineered Code Consulting, Inc. Basically, I'm a Microsoft MVP that specializes in Power Apps portals. I've been working with them almost my entire career here. I probably should update that slide. I think it's almost 12 plus years now, having started my career with ADX Studio, the people that built portals and were acquired by Microsoft about 6 years ago. If you want to follow me or reach out to me on any of my social channels, you'll see that I've got LinkedIn, and we've got Twitter, and we've got a blog, and we've got a YouTube channel that we do post a weekly video on, as well as a podcast that I host with a fellow MVP, Nick Dolman, called Refresh the Cache. That's all focused on portals as well. So feel free to like, subscribe, whatever the kids are saying is cool to do these days. And yeah, reach out to me on, connect with me on LinkedIn if you haven't already. As always, I'd like to express my sincere appreciation, gratitude towards the folks at MS Dynamics World. Today we've got Laura with us, which is a nice change. No offense, Jason, but sometimes a change is nice. And so, but yeah, Jason and the whole team over at MS Dynamics World really do a lot of work behind the scenes to help get us ready for this, help get the word out. So really appreciate their support over the last almost year and a half now that we've been doing these. All right, so let's get into what our agenda is for today. We've got a couple of news items. It was a relatively active month for news and portals. Lots coming down the pipe from the portals team, so that's very good. We'll then talk about today's topic, which is PCF and Power Apps portals, which is PCF controls are something that are now in preview for portals. So what I intend on doing is kind of just going through the steps of what's involved with using PCF on Power Apps portals. We'll then talk about the date and time of the next portals community call, and we will have time for Q&A if there's any questions, whether it's PCF related or anything else. We've got some time at the end to cover those. So let's dive right into the portals news. So like I said, a couple of fairly significant items over the, basically since we last got together about a month ago, and that is the Power Apps command line now includes some commands for portals. So that's the pack tool that I'm not sure, if you're kind of in the developer world, you may have run into. We'll see it when we get into our PCF control. But now there is pack PA portal, and there's three functions. So there's the list, which will give you kind of a list of the portals instances. There's download, which will download the content from your portal. What it does is it actually stores it it downloads it in YAML format. So if you're not familiar with YAML, it's it literally stands for yet another markup language. It's all about tabs and white space. So think of it as similar to XML, just a different format for downloading things in. So you essentially have the ability to download your portal configurations. So again, specifically like the records or the data that's in Dataverse. So with that command, you can download the stuff and then make changes if you want, and then you can use the upload command to push it back. So really where the focus for this stuff is around the ALM process. So probably not so much downloading from one environment and uploading back to it, but think of downloading from dev and then uploading to QA, test, production, any of the other upstream environments. That's really where the focus is here. So definitely a step in the right direction in terms of making the ALM process easier for Power Apps portals. There's still the other way of doing it with configuration migration tools. So, but it seems like this is where the focus is going to be moving forward for Power Apps portals. So it's great to see that portals is getting the love in the Power Apps command line tool. The other piece of news here is the ability to modify table permissions in Portal Studio. And I'll probably just demo this a little bit during when we talk about PCF controls here. But yeah, in the Portal Studio, so this isn't in the model-driven app, but when you go into make.powerapps.com and then you click on your portal and you go to edit it, in that Portal Studio, you can now manage your what used to be called entity permissions are now called table permissions. And what's really kind of great about this interface is that it kind of hierarchically organizes all your entity permissions, or sorry, table permissions. You can see which roles are associated to them kind of at a glance. So it's not anything new in terms of like there's not any table permissions features that have been added. It's just managing those table permissions is a lot easier in the Portal Studio now. So that is, I believe, in preview still. So the key there is just making sure you're going to make.preview.powerapps.com instead of just make.powerapps.com. But yeah, I'd strongly suggest checking it out and seeing kind of all the features that kind of just the UI is just so much kind of easier to set up all your permissions. You can set up the child permissions, all that sort of stuff. So it's really quite a nice improvement to the user experience for doing your table permissions. All right, and that's really what we've got in terms of news this month. Just double checking, I don't see any questions yet. So why don't we jump into today's topic, which is PCF and Power Apps portals. All right, so PCF, what is PCF? So PCF is Power Apps Component Framework. I guess maybe people might call it PACF now because Power Apps, but when PCF first was around, Power Apps was one word. So like I say with most things about Microsoft naming, don't get too attached. But yeah, so PCF is Power Apps Component Framework. At a high level, what it is it allows you to build rich UI controls using JavaScript. And the idea is that you can include those controls in all the different types of Power Apps. So the ability to include them on Canvas, I think, is in preview still. Maybe I can't remember if the Canvas apps one is GA. The model-driven apps version is generally available, and now what we have is it's generally available, or sorry, it's in preview for portals. So it's basically kind of an interface that Microsoft has developed that says, hey, you can build these controls and you can use them to replace some of the out-of-the-box controls that Microsoft gives you. And what I kind of find interesting is that this is how Microsoft is actually starting to build their own controls internally too. So if you look at, say, like just a standard text box on a model-driven form, Microsoft is kind of working on making that, well, it's just a PCF control. Like they internally build all these things as PCF controls as well. So not only can you build your own, but you can also go and visit a site like pcf.gallery, which I believe Guido, fellow MVP, it manages. But there are hundreds, I think, dozens for sure, hundreds maybe, of these PCF controls that are available that you can essentially just download and install in your environment. The way that you get them is that a PCF control is contained, it's just a component that goes into your solutions. So what you can do is download the solution from PCF Gallery, install it in your Dataverse environment, and then attach that PCF control in the appropriate place. Now, in general, PCF controls, especially in the model-driven world, I won't speak too much about Canvas because I really don't know that much about it, but in the model-driven app world, and therefore kind of in the portals world where very similar to the model-driven app, the idea with PCF controls is that they replace either a field on a form or an entire grid. So whether that grid is I think there's support for subgrids, or whether you're looking at a view on like a view on a in your kind of primary navigation. If you go to your list of all contacts, you can then write a custom control that replaces that grid. So my first experience with PCF controls was replacing a view that was for a real estate company. That view got replaced with a map of all of their properties. So the data source underneath was here's a list of all their properties, and so it respects all the configuration that you do for the view, so all the filter criteria, all that sort of stuff. But what we did is we replaced the UI of the grid with a map, and so we put the pinpoints all over the map, and it works very well. So that was possible before by just including a web resource on your in your sitemap. But what's great about this is that it's just one of the views that you have on the, say in that case, the property entity. So you can flip between these different views. Some of them might be more traditional views, other ones might be PCF controls that are displaying a map. So again, the idea is that these PCF controls let you either replace grids or views or subgrids, or they let you replace fields on your forms. And like I said, they are now, just in the last few weeks here, now supported on portals in preview. So they're not generally available, but they are in preview. And we'll talk about some of the limitations here kind of closer to the end. But right now, the thing to understand is that with portals, they're really meant for fields, and what you use them for is you can replace fields on basic or advanced forms. And if you didn't kind of hear the news, I think we mentioned this maybe last month or the month before. Basic forms are what they now call entity forms, and advanced forms are what they now call web forms. So if you hear me talk about basic forms and advanced forms, those are just entity forms and web forms. So the idea is that we can build these PCF controls that we can then use and replace the UI on one of the fields that exists on one of our forms. Now I'm just going to use kind of the standard in what I show you here today. I'm just going to use this like the prototypical Microsoft example, which is taking a number box and replacing it with a slider, like a linear slider control. And I'll show you how we can do that in portals. So at a high level, what steps are involved in that? So you got to build your PCF control, or you download it from somewhere else. I mean, it's you need to have your PCF control. I'm not going to dive too deep today into how we build PCF controls. That's an entire session unto itself. The thing to know right now, and again, we'll get into the limitations here in a bit, but with portals, they're really meant for, we've got our fields, and you can't really use much of the fancier like web APIs or any of the kind of additional things that you might get in some of the other places where PCF controls are available. So the idea is that you're replacing what would normally be like a standard input, you're providing your own UI to that, and then you're returning back the value that should be saved. So again, the linear kind of the slider for selecting a number is a perfect example. Rather than just being a text box where you type in a number, we've got the linear slider. It picks the number, and then whatever value you select on that slider gets saved back to Dataverse automatically. There is no, so there is JavaScript, obviously, when you're building the PCF control, but if you use things from the community, if you go to pcf.gallery and find these controls there already, you can do that and use those, what other people have built, and you can drop them right into your portal, and you don't have to touch a line of JavaScript, so they're pretty cool. So the steps to do that, like I said, you need to have your PCF control, or you need to you need to build it or download it from somewhere else. You then add the control to your model-driven app form. So like you would if you were just putting that control as per usual into a model-driven app form, which unless they've changed something recently, you still have to kind of switch to the classics experience to set that to set up the components there. Once you've got the control on the form, you create your whether it's your basic form or your advanced form. You use the form that you've configured that on. What there is new as part of this release is there's a new type of form metadata. So whether it's basic or advanced form metadata, there's a new option in the control style that says code component. And that's what tells the portal that, hey, there's actually a PCF control associated with this field. Use the one that's been defined on the form. And then the last step is just to create a table permissioned or entity permissions for web resource. So users who are looking at one of these PCF controls must have read permissions on the web resource table. So that's kind of the one. The rest of it's all pretty, you probably didn't even need documentation to know how to do this, right? You build your PCF control, you add it to the form, you add your metadata. The adding the read table permission for web resource, that's one, that's probably the oddball in there that a lot of people may miss if they didn't kind of go through the documentation. So what I'm going to do is we're just going to kind of step through that process. So let me bring up my PCF control that I've got here, and that is right here. Okay, so here's my PCF control. What I've done is I've just downloaded the linear component, like I said, from Microsoft, and just to kind of prove to you that I'm not just making this up, I'm just going to go into the CSS. I'm going to put the background here. Typically it's transparent, and I'm going to just set this to green. So the rest of this was literally just copy and pasted from the Microsoft sample. They've basically written the TypeScript that generates this kind of slider input. You can see it's using a type range. So we're using the range input type. We've defined in our control manifest that we are able to use this control to replace fields that either whole number, currency, floating point, or decimal. And we're basically just pointing the the TypeScript file as we're including that as a resource in our CSS. And then I'm just going to go npm run build to build my project. And then I'm going to use the pack PCF push command, which will take the local code and actually push it up to my development environment. So there we can see I've successfully built my PCF control. And then I'm going to run this pack PCF push. So what this does is it takes my project, it generates a solution and uploads and updates everything for me. It's quite a great tool here for development. So I'm going to do that. And we are just going to wait for that to hopefully succeed. I did bang my head against the wall for about 2 hours last night trying to get that to work. I made the mistake of saying, sure, get me the latest version of the pack tool. And I don't know if it's just an environment issue or whatever, but I was running into missing dependencies issues. So I eventually was able to solve it by kind of going back a couple of versions. But I did not have any luck with the latest version, which just came out 5 days ago. So not sure if it was just me or not, but hopefully this goes through okay here. So you can see that it's created my zip file for my solution. It's now importing it into my environment. And in a minute here, that will be hopefully successful. So this is basically step number one. We have to get our PCF control. Again, we can go to pcf.gallery. I'm sure there are some controls there that may work. It's also important to understand that there are most that won't work. Anything that's using under the dependencies, you can include things like Web API. There are advanced things that you can include. A lot of them kind of meant for Canvas apps. Those are not applicable on the portal yet. So I would say probably most PCF controls on the PCF gallery will not, just work and download them and away you go. That being said, there's probably a lot in there that could be, with slight modifications, be used very well on the portal. So something to keep in mind. All right, so that's been built and pushed. If I check my environment here, bring this over here, and I go to my solutions, we can see this is that Power Apps Tools _NH solution that has just been imported. See, it was just modified 1 minute ago. So next step, what I have is I've created a custom entity called golf course. That's the example I typically do. I'm kind of a golf nut, so that's what I use in my demos. So I've got this golf course table that we're dealing with here. And what I've created on there is a field called number of holes. It's a whole number field, number of holes. I didn't realize how confusing that would be. Whole number, number of holes. Well, that worked out well. So I have a form here. I'm going to look at the information form, and I've already placed the number of holes field on that form. But what we want to do is we want to update that to, instead of using, I'm just going to go over here and I'm going to show you what happens when I create a new one. So you can see there's the slider already. I've got it configured there. So it's already showing up as green because if I go into here, now unfortunately, if I go to components, I can see that it's here. I go to, oh, did they, just wondering if this, yeah. See what you may think that you can edit, but if you go to here and add components here, you don't see the custom ones yet. So if anyone knows a way of doing that in this UI, please tell me. But my understanding is we still have to switch back to the classic. So if we switch over to the classic interface, what we do is we go into here, and then we go into the controls, and you can see here, if I were just to kind of get this back to where it was going to be, I'm just going to save and publish that. If I go into this, and then is that done publishing? It is done publishing. All right, so now it's just expecting, so let's just say there's 18 holes at test course 2. Save and close. So that's going to work. That's going to save the number of holes. Now, again, I want to replace that with my custom PCF control. So I go to controls, I say add control. Now the one that I've uploaded, which is this one right here, is in the list. So I click add. Now there are options for kind of which interface you're using. The portal cares about the web one. So whether you select it for phone or tablet is kind of irrelevant to the portal. The portal will pick up whatever you set for the web one. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to say web for that one. I'm going to say OK. I'm going to say click save. And I'm going to click publish. Now if I go back to thing here, if I click new golf course, I should get my PCF control with the green background. There we go. Obviously a terrible user experience with the green background, but there you go. So we can kind of do this. Oh, can I get it to go 18? There, 18, keyboard works. So I can say test 4, save and close. And the key is I got test 4 here, and you can see that's 18. So not only is the UI working, but it's also saving the data appropriately back. So we've created our PCF control, we've uploaded it, we've configured it on the form that we're going to end up using on the portal. So what's next? What we want to do is we actually want to build a basic form that uses this model-driven app form and put that on the portal. So to do that, I'm going to go into here. So this is the Portal Studio. Maybe I'll just kind of start from scratch here. Make.powerapps.com. Just switch into the PCF here. And so if I go into my apps, and we've got my portal, I click edit. This is what we call the Portal Studio. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new page. And right from Portal Studio, I can actually create the basic form. Now I can't set up the entity, or sorry, the basic form metadata. We'll have to do that in the model-driven app, but we'll start off with this. So in here, we'll say add new golf course. So we'll set that, add new golf course. All right, so I've got that hooked up. So now we have this page called add new golf course. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a component to it. And so what I'm going to add is a form, which is a basic form. I'm going to say I want to create a new one. I'm going to say insert golf course. For the table, I'm going to say golf course. And I'm going to pick my main information form. I'm going to say this is going to be an insert. I'm not so concerned about the success settings. I'm going to leave table permissions off because I'll let anyone who wants to insert a golf course, and I'll just not worry about CAPTCHA for anyone right now. So I've done that. I've created my form. What I'm going to do is I'm going to see what it looks like when I browse the portal. So I'm going to click the browse website button. That also kind of clears the cache for me in case there's any kind of caching issues, and we'll see what happens when we go to the add new golf course form on the portal. So got name, we got number of holes. Test 5. Let's say that's a 27 hole course. We didn't, our PCF control wasn't there. We can confirm that, yes, look, it created it, test 5, 27, but why didn't it show up there? Well, the first thing is we didn't set up the metadata. So the portal doesn't really know that we've replaced that with a PCF control. So what we're going to do is we're going to switch over to our model-driven app. We're going to go into our basic forms, and we're going to look at this insert golf course. So in the insert golf course, what we're going to do is we're going to add some form metadata that tells the portal, hey, we've got a PCF control on this one actually. So here we're going to say it's an attribute type. We're going to say number of holes. And here is the, where is it here? Oh, sorry, right here, control style. Code component. That's kind of the big new thing here is that if you don't have the latest version, so if you go to try this in your own environment and you don't see this working, you don't see code component, what that means is that you do not have the latest versions of the solutions for portals installed in your Dataverse environment, and you need to get those upgraded. So you need to make sure that both the portal code is updated and the portal solutions are updated. I can't remember the exact minimum versions off the top of my head, but again, this is all new in the last few weeks. So you need to make sure that you are relatively up to date on your thing. So if you don't see the code component in there, that's an indication that you do not have the latest versions of the portal solutions installed in your Dataverse environment. I'm going to do that. I'm going to say code component. I'm going to click save. And that's really all I have to do. I just have to say that, hey, portal code, the number of holes on this one is actually using a code component. So I'm going to go back to here. I'm going to click browse website again because I'm just going to clear the cache, because anytime, of course, we make any changes via the model-driven app, we have to clear the cache on the portal. And so the browse website kind of takes care of that for us. This is going to refresh the page. But look, we still haven't done that last step that I talked about. And I really have to give kind of kudos to Microsoft on really descriptive, like they couldn't make it any more obvious as to what's going on wrong, because you don't have read privileges for the web resource table. So that's the last step here. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add those in. I'm going to go to make.preview.powerapps.com. And the reason I'm going to do that is so that I can create my table permissions using the new UI that I was talking about earlier. So within the make.preview.powerapps.com, we've got the settings. So now we can see table permissions. What we need to do is, since there's no permissions yet, we need to create a new one. So I'm going to create a new one. So the name is, let's just call it web resources. The table is web resource. Access type. So this is global. So we're saying that they can read all web resources because it's not, the web resources are not in any way related to our contact record, and we're giving the read permission. And we're going to add some roles here, and we're going to say anyone who's anonymous or authenticated. In our case, we're just dealing with anonymous right now, but let's pretend that authenticated users are going to use this as well. So we're giving it to both, basically everyone who's on our portal, because everyone who's on our portal is either anonymous or authenticated. So I'm going to do that. So now we got anonymous, authenticated. Click save. So now we've got the read permissions for anonymous and authenticated users on the web resource table. I'm going to go back here and refresh, and it's not going to work because I haven't cleared the cache. So let me do that. We're just going to go to this page, browse website, and we'll see if this time we will get our slider on there. I sure hope we do. If we don't, I don't know what went wrong. Look at that. Now this is interesting. This is yellow. Yellow was my previous version. So it looks like there's some caching that goes on behind the scenes with Microsoft because yeah, yellow was the version that I was working on before I uploaded the green one. So I'm kind of curious as to what one has to do to get this update to green, which is why these things are in preview. So that's something I'll ask Microsoft about to figure out what do we have to do to get this to pull the latest version of the PCF control. It could be because I didn't actually increment the version number of my PCF control. Maybe the portal's kind of relying on that, which is something that you'll sometimes see in the when you're moving across PCF controls and managed solutions. But this is the first time I've kind of noticed it not updating after updating a version. But anyways, the only difference between these was the color. So I'm going to change this to say 33. I'm going to put in test 6. And then I'm going to click submit. Submission completed successfully. If I go back to my list here, you can see we've got test 6 with 33. So our portal is now using the PCF control that we've built, and we kind of have that more enhanced UI, and it is saving that data successfully back to the field. If there are any questions as to kind of what we've talked about so far, please do feel free to put those into the questions block. What I want to do was just kind of dive a little bit more, not too deep, but a little bit more into the PCF control here, just to kind of show you what this kind of basic one does. I mean, the big thing is, again, these are what we got in portals right now is it's really about replacing the tech boxes or say the drop downs associated with certain field types. So all this thing is really doing is returning this get outputs, is returning the values that you're getting out of this control. So this thing is setting up the input element, so it's making it a type range. We're putting a min and max. So if you can think about all the opportunities to make this even cooler, you could make these as parameters, the min and max. So on a golf course, maybe maybe it's 1 to 18 or 36 or whatever kind of the common golf course sizes are. You could even have different steps. So you could say, well, I know that the options are 9, 18, 27, and 36, for example. So you could kind of build that into your range as well. So this is essentially creating that input, adding it to that specific spot on the page. This is if the data ever gets refreshed, which isn't really a problem on the portal, kind of tells us how to, so as that data gets refreshed, it's basically setting that label elements. So if you were watching, if I go back to here, so as this is changing, as this data changes, this data right here is changing. So that's how that kind of works. And that's being handled in that refresh data event here, is that this label element is being updated every time that that's called. And then same with the update view. And then here it's just when you go to save the form, the code will be pulling out its outputs in order to know what the value is of this particular control. So that's kind of the thing, is that in the end, it passes back whatever value you've set in the control. Got some questions here. What kind of time should be expected for something to be loaded when you create the portal window? How long for the portal to update with the new PCF? I don't get anywhere near as fast as what you are showing. For something to be loaded. So that's Ian. Ian, are you saying that you've built some sort of kind of rich UI, and when the screen loads, like you don't see that UI for a bit? Maybe if you can just, this is how long for the portal to update with the new PCF. I don't get anywhere near as fast as what you're showing. Yeah, to be honest, I I haven't played around with it much other than what I've done here, and it was kind of instant. So I haven't run into cases where if you have a much more complex PCF control, is there maybe in theory you can build out these relatively complex React components, and if those, I know when you're working in dev with React components, sometimes the web packed version of those, oh no, to publish the portal screen. So I guess, are you ensuring to clear your, not to load the screen itself? Okay, no, to publish the portal screen. So I guess, Ian, are you saying that like you make the updates and then it doesn't show up on the portal for a while? That probably sounds like caching, probably. Like, are you ensuring that you're clearing the cache whenever you're making any of these changes? Yeah, so that's the only thing I can think of, is that it's maybe a caching issue. Feel free to provide more details, Ian, if you'd like to, in the chat there. Yeah, okay, yeah, he's saying he's new to portals. So yeah, Ian, most likely, whenever you make any changes that are not directly on the portal itself, the cache, it's basically cached indefinitely. So it's not like, oh, after 15 minutes. There is certain portal data, so the non-core portal data, so like things, if you make changes to contacts or accounts or opportunities or those types of things, that will refresh after 15 minutes. But the core portal configuration, things like entity forms and or basic forms, advanced forms, that's cached indefinitely. So you basically, if you don't clear the cache, it could be days. You're essentially waiting for the portal to go to sleep, and then you have to wake it up again for that cache to clear, because that is cached indefinitely unless you do that. So very strongly recommend you look at into how to clear the cache, because that will save you a bunch of time. All right, we've got a question from Manjunith. How can we trace we're using the right pack version before we push the PCF component? Or do you have guidance to use pack version for deploying custom PCF? Yeah, I mean, I think the version I'm using right now is here, let me see. Pack. I'm using 1.5.5. Last night when I was testing this stuff out, I was running into the issues with 1.6.5. Essentially, there was a dependency issue where when it was trying to build the control, or when it was trying to deploy the control, it was looking for system.runtime version 4.2.2.0, and it couldn't find it. And more than an hour later, I basically updated in here. No, do you know what? It was in. No, it wasn't in here. It was in my project file. Not. So there's that project file. This one right here. I did this when I forced it to be 1.3.5. The 1.star was giving me issues, so that's the one change I made on that one. What else do we got here? We've got Paul, is PCF simply web resources renamed? Looks like it's doing all the web resource stuff behind the scenes. If it's true, I assume the same is true for Canvas apps. Is it true? Yes and no. So there's a few things that are different about PCF controls versus web resources. So yes, I mean, it's all just JavaScript. One of the big differences is that it's not in an iframe. So when you do web resources, your thing is self-contained in an iframe. And so with a PCF control, it is not an iframe. That markup is literally being injected on the thing. And the other thing that's kind of different about PCF controls is that because it's not in an iframe, when you're saving data, like it's literally replacing that control. So you don't have to worry about saving the data yourself. It's actually, it's actually just part of the regular save process. So there's certainly a lot of overlap between what you could do with web resource and what you can do with PCF controls. The guidance that we've kind of received and that I like to say is, if you can do it with a PCF control, I'd recommend doing it with it. There's still lots of things you can't do with PCF controls. web resources aren't going anywhere anytime soon, as far as I know. So it's not like web resources are gone, but if you're writing a single if you're writing web resources just simply to replace a field and make that field kind of a better UI, you can do that. And then obviously in the model-driven apps where it comes to the lists of things, so to be able to replace subgrids and views, I mean, that's something that's just not the same as a web resource at all. I mean, you can kind of replicate it, but you're taking over like the whole page versus just one option in the view drop-down list. So yeah, very, very similar, but because of the interface that you have to implement as part of your as part of your component here, if I just go back to it here, obviously a web control or web resource is really just it's HTML, JavaScript hosted in an iframe, whereas this is a lot more structured in terms of like the functions that you have to call. They call the init, they call the refresh data update view, and that's kind of the key, is that you give it the outputs and it's saving the value and it's handling all the saving of the value. You'll notice in here that I haven't written a line of code that saves anything or anything like that. Like there's no web API interactions or anything like that. That's all handled for me. So that would be the big key or the big difference. Oh, sorry, I missed a question here. Can we change option set fields to checkboxes using this PCF? Yeah, I think option sets field to checkboxes. I mean, so yes, except for the fact that I guess it would be more likely to be a radio button list, because if it's checkboxes, you could do multi-select, and so multi-selects are not supported yet. But in theory, yeah, if you had an option set field that you want to represent as checkboxes that uncheck themselves as and only a single one was selected, you certainly could do that in a PCF control. What else do we have here? All right, just thank yous, and that helps. Perfect. I will try and keep an eye on the chat here, or on the questions here, but I think I've addressed them all. What time we got here? 1:42. Perfect. So I'm just going to jump back to my presentation here. So again, you build your PCF controller, you download it from somewhere else. It's all about getting your solution in your environment. You add the control to your model-driven app form. You gotta switch to Classic to do that. You add the basic advanced form metadata for that particular field, and then you add the read table permission for web resource, and that's it. I mean, the hard part is writing the PCF control. The rest after that's pretty easy. All right. The last thing I want to talk about here is just some of the limitations. So for portals specifically in the preview, it's really only supported for certain field types. So it's kind of the basic ones: text, numbers, that sort of things. So there's no support for lookups. There's no support for, I don't think they have support for multi-selects. So, really this is in preview now. So the support is a little bit limited in those cases. And then again, there's advanced code components that you can use, including the web API, that are not accessible. So in a PCF control that you're building for a model-driven app, you can request, basically say, hey, I need the web API as part of this. And they'll essentially pass you in a reference to the web API that you can then use to do other operations. That doesn't exist with portals. They're not passing you in a reference to the web API. Now, that doesn't mean that you couldn't write in if you wrote a PCF control that couldn't use the new portals web API. It is, my guess is it is possible. I haven't tried it yet myself, but I mean, in the end, it is just JavaScript. So I'm assuming you probably can write the functions that you need to call off and do that, but it's not the kind of the standard way. I would personally wait for them to give that to you. I'm sure that's coming, where they'll just kind of hand you, here's the web API that you can call and make your requests, similar to how it works in model-driven apps, but that is not yet supported in portals. All right, so that's kind of what I wanted to cover. Again, really the complexity here is learning how to build PCF controls, and I mean, that's a whole other, that would be a topic for another month, just how do we build PCF controls for portals. And right now, again, things are pretty basic in terms of, we've just kind of got the simple fields. So it really turns into, do you know TypeScript? Do you know do you want to start using things like the Fluent UI, the React, all those types of things? So that's really the complexity here with the PCF controls. What I really am excited to see over the next little while is how much the community starts developing these PCF controls that can be shared. So it'll be less about, hey, do you have to build your PCF control, and more about, hey, we've got all these PCF controls for the community that are available on the PCF.gallery site that everyone can just start using, so that we're all not reinventing the wheel. That's kind of what I hope to see. Again, well, we can hang on. We got time here for questions, but did want to just say that the next call will be June 17th. So not too far from now. So a few weeks away, but June 17th will be the next call. Haven't chosen a topic yet for that one. So if anyone's got any ideas, please, always open to suggestions. Also always open to guest speakers. So if anyone out there is interested in presenting a topic to the community, always happy to entertain that as well. Again, just want to say thank you to Laura and Jason and everyone at MS Dynamics World. And I will leave it open to see if there's any more questions. Otherwise, I know that people would hate to get more time back in their day, but we can always end a little early today if there's no more questions. All right, I'm not seeing any more questions, so seems like that might be it for today. Thank you everyone for joining us. I hope. We do have a question here. Coding languages for PCF. Which ones do you need to know to start with? So when you create a new PCF project in order to initialize and create a PCF project, you use the pack tool, and so there's basically a way to initialize and it creates a bunch of stuff for you. So TypeScript is the big one, and if you're building PCF controls in a model-driven app, the way that I've seen it mostly done is you're using the Fluent UI React components. So if you want to get into PCF controls for model-driven apps, it's learning TypeScript and then using React as the framework for your for your control. And then in terms of the UI, Microsoft basically has what they call their Fluent UI framework, which has a bunch of React components in it. And what it does is it makes it feel very native to the Dynamics instance. So Microsoft is building dynamic or model-driven apps using this Fluent UI. So if you want the buttons to look like their buttons and you want all these different UI components to look like theirs, you can build them out using the Fluent UI. Obviously, the portal doesn't use that, so if you build out them using that, it may feel a little bit out of place. So if I was building a PCF control specifically for portal, you could be using React if you wanted to, but definitely TypeScript is what most people would be doing, and then just using Bootstrap version 3 like the rest of the portal does. Can we download the PCF solution directly from Google? Not quite sure what you mean by that. I mean, the PCF solutions, most of them, like in the community, they are, unless you're referring to the PCF, like the pack tool. The pack tool is available on NuGet. There's a download for that. But the PCF controls themselves, the best resource for those online is the PCF.gallery. And for the most case, what people have done is they've uploaded the solutions that you can just directly install in your environment. So if I did the TypeScript basics, how much Fluent do you need to know? You don't really need to know any Fluent or React if you're just building PCF controls for portals. It would be, however, you can choose whatever UI framework you want. It's really kind of up to you. It's just that React and Fluent UI is what Microsoft uses in the model-driven apps. So that's why you'll see a lot of PCF controls that use that. So that's really but you can get away and you can write a whole, I would definitely recommend TypeScript, but you can get away, once you've got TypeScript, you can get away with kind of whatever UI framework that you want to be using, or just kind of build it all out yourself. All right. Thanks, Paul, for the kind words. I'm not seeing any other questions, so I think that we will wrap it up for today. Laura, anything to say before we drop off here?
Well, Nick, Laura's gone, but it's Jason
Nope.
here. No, I think that's it. Thanks so much for doing it once again.
You didn't hear all the things I said about you at the beginning, right?
I missed it. I'll catch
Oh,
on.
good. Yeah, you don't want. Yeah, you might just don't listen to it.
Oh, okay.
Great
Yeah,
to
thanks
have you.
everyone. We'll stop the recording there.